This morning, a U.S. Navy fighter jet was forced to take decisive action over the Arabian Sea. An Iranian drone approached one of America's most powerful aircraft carriers with unclear intent. Despite repeated warnings, the drone continued its course, prompting an immediate response in international waters. The incident adds fresh tension to an already volatile region, just days before high-level talks that could shape the future of Iran's nuclear ambitions. Good evening. I'm reporting from the Worldview studio, where we examine the forces shaping global security and stability. This is Worldview. Tonight, we bring you an in-depth look at escalating maritime confrontations in the Middle East, diplomatic efforts to avert broader conflict, ongoing violence in Gaza, and the push for stronger collective defense across the Atlantic Alliance. We begin with the latest flashpoint at sea. Before we start, wherever you're watching or listening from, drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe to the channel. Today, we'll continue this conversation in the comments and respond to your questions. The events unfolded yesterday in the vast expanse of the Arabian Sea, roughly 500 miles from Iran's southern coastline. The USS Abraham Lincoln, a Nimitz-class supercarrier and the centerpiece of Carrier Strike Group 3, was conducting routine transits in international waters. These operations are a long-standing presence for the U.S. Navy in the region, aimed at safeguarding freedom of navigation, deterring threats to commercial shipping, and supporting partners across the Middle East. According to a detailed statement from U.S. Central Command, an Iranian Shahed 139 drone, known for its long-range capabilities and often associated with one-way attack missions, began maneuvering toward the Lincoln. The drone's approach was described as aggressive and unnecessary. U.S. forces first attempted de-escalatory measures. Warnings were issued through standard protocols in international airspace and waters. The intent appeared unclear, but the trajectory left little room for ambiguity. The unmanned aircraft persisted in closing the distance. In response, an F-35C Lightning II stealth fighter launched directly from the deck of the Abraham Lincoln engaged the drone. The shootdown occurred in self-defense, protecting the carrier, its air wing, and the thousands of sailors and Marines aboard. No American personnel were injured. No U.S. equipment sustained damage. Central Command emphasized that continued harassment and threats in international waters and airspace will not be tolerated, as such actions raise the risk of miscalculation and regional instability. This was not an isolated episode. Reports indicate additional provocations in the same time frame, including Iranian small boats harassing a U.S.-flagged merchant vessel in the Strait of Hormuz. A Navy destroyer intervened to ensure the tanker's safe passage. These incidents form part of a broader pattern of Iranian maritime behavior that U.S. officials have repeatedly condemned, actions that endanger civilian mariners, disrupt global energy flows, and challenge the rules-based international order. The Shahed 139 represents a class of drones that Iran has exported and deployed in various conflicts. Its design allows for extended endurance, precision guidance, and low-cost production, making it a favored tool for asymmetric tactics. When directed toward a capital asset like an aircraft carrier, even a single platform carries significant implications. The carrier's defensive layers, ranging from electronic warfare systems to layered air patrols, performed exactly as designed, yet the decision to engage underscores the razor-thin margin for error in these waters. This confrontation arrives at a particularly sensitive diplomatic moment. President Trump addressed the situation from the White House yesterday, signaling a mix of resolve and openness to dialogue. He referenced past opportunities for Iran to change course on its nuclear program, on support for proxy groups, and on internal repression, and stressed that patience has limits. The president noted that Iran appears interested in negotiation, but he cautioned that any deal must be concrete and verifiable. In the coming days, a key meeting is scheduled. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, tasked with advancing U.S. interests in the Middle East, and Jared Kushner are expected to sit down with Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Initial plans pointed to Istanbul, though discussions about venue and format, possibly shifting to Oman and narrowing focus to the nuclear file, have surfaced. Iran has signaled conditional support for fair and equitable talks, provided the environment remains free of threats or unreasonable demands. The backdrop to these discussions is stark. The United States maintains a formidable naval presence in the region, an armada described by officials as ready to act if diplomacy fails. The objective remains clear: preventing Iran from ever acquiring a nuclear weapon. Beyond that, the administration has highlighted the need for Tehran to halt support for militant groups across the region and to end the violent suppression of domestic protests demanding greater freedoms. U.S. Ambassador to NATO Matthew Whitaker addressed the drone incident directly in recent comments. He described the event as concerning, but noted that American multi-domain awareness systems detected and handled the threat effectively. No direct danger reached the ship, he said, yet the provocation was unmistakable. Ambassador Whitaker stressed that Iran should avoid such actions if it genuinely seeks a negotiated resolution. He pointed to President Trump's track record: willing to engage in talks, yet unwilling to tolerate endless delays or violations. The president has drawn clear red lines, not only on nuclear ambitions, but also on the treatment of Iranian citizens protesting for basic rights and democracy. Reports indicate that thousands, possibly tens of thousands, have lost their lives in the crackdown over recent weeks. The administration views these as intertwined issues. A regime that represses its people at home is unlikely to honor commitments abroad. Ambassador Whitaker emphasized precision and judicious use of force. He referenced past operations that achieved objectives without descending into prolonged chaos. Regime change, he noted, carries risks, pointing to historical examples where interventions led to instability. The focus, he said, remains on verifiable actions that ensure Iran remains non-nuclear and ceases destabilizing activities. The conversation naturally extends to Israel's security concerns. Special Envoy Witkoff met recently with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem. The Israeli leader reiterated that Iran cannot be trusted to uphold any agreement it signs. Netanyahu urged the United States to maintain a firm negotiating stance, insisting on ironclad guarantees rather than words alone. On the ground in Gaza, developments remain fluid and tragic. Israeli forces reported that militants opened fire on IDF soldiers, wounding personnel and prompting retaliatory strikes. Hospitals in Gaza reported significant casualties from these exchanges, including women and children. The violence underscores the fragility of any pause in hostilities. Israel maintains that it has every right to defend itself against threats from Hamas, a group designated as terrorist by the United States and many allies. Backed by Iranian support, Hamas has repeatedly launched attacks that endanger civilians on both sides. Recent operations targeted militants emerging near security lines, with Israel asserting compliance with existing understandings while responding proportionately. The Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt reopened under new security protocols, allowing limited passage for humanitarian and medical evacuations. However, restrictions and interruptions have persisted, complicating efforts to move patients and aid. Palestinian officials reported delays and halts in crossings, even as preparations continue for medical evacuations. The suffering in Gaza remains profound. Families displaced, infrastructure devastated, and access to basic care severely limited. Israel insists that Hamas must be dismantled as a military force to prevent future attacks. Officials argue that a terrorist organization embedded among civilians creates impossible dilemmas for defensive operations. The goal, they say, is a future where Gaza's people can live peacefully, free from the cycle of violence perpetuated by groups funded and armed by Tehran. Across the Atlantic, NATO allies continue addressing long-standing calls for equitable burden sharing. At the recent summit in The Hague, leaders committed to a new benchmark: 5% of GDP on defense and related security investments by 2035. This includes at least 3.5% on core military requirements, troops, equipment, readiness, and up to 1.5% on resilience measures, such as protecting infrastructure, cybersecurity, civil preparedness, and strengthening the defense industrial base. The previous 2% guideline, set in 2014, has now been met or exceeded by all allies, a significant shift driven by Russia's invasion of Ukraine and broader global challenges. In 2025 estimates, countries like Poland lead with spending well above 4%, reflecting its frontline position and strategic investments in modern capabilities. Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia also stand out, committing resources far beyond their size due to direct exposure to threats from the east. Germany has outlined plans to reach its commitments within the next several years, a remarkable turnaround from earlier years, when spending hovered lower. Progress is evident across much of the alliance, though some members farther from immediate pressure points continue to accelerate at a slower pace. Ambassador Whitaker highlighted these efforts during discussions on alliance readiness. He pointed to tremendous strides in eastern flank nations, Poland already surpassing targets, Baltic states demonstrating resolve through substantial investments. The emphasis is not merely on percentages, but on capability, ensuring forces can fight tonight if necessary, with modern weapons, sustainable logistics, and interoperable systems. The United States continues leading from the front, with a proposed military budget approaching $1.5 trillion. This investment supports not only American forces, but the collective strength of the alliance. Yet the message remains clear. True deterrence requires all partners to contribute proportionally. Strength shared across 32 nations creates a more credible guarantee of peace. These threads, Iran's provocations at sea, the push for a nuclear accord, Israel's defensive operations, and NATO's renewed commitment interconnect in a complex global landscape. Maritime incidents risk rapid escalation. Diplomatic windows remain open but narrow. Civilian suffering in conflict zones demands urgent attention. Alliance solidarity faces ongoing tests. What happens next depends on choices made in capitals from Washington to Tehran, Jerusalem to Brussels. Will provocations give way to verifiable steps? Can negotiations produce lasting restraints? Will allies fully resource the capabilities needed for an uncertain world? These are the questions defining this moment. We will continue tracking every development. Thank you for joining us on Worldview. Stay engaged, share your thoughts below, and we'll respond directly. Good night.